PTF and JK back with you for another In the Money Media Top 10 video as the rubber starts to meet the road in this Triple Crown prep season. This video brought to you by our friends at twinspires.com and Twinspires Contest. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them a little bit later in the video. JK, before we get into the current top 10, as we like to do around here, let's get to the runners who are out of the top 10. And we'll start off with one who's out maybe temporarily. That's Burnham Square. This horse did not have the same kind of punch when last seen. They opted not to bring him back for the Florida Derby this weekend. They're going to wait another week for the Bluegrass. I'm not fully giving up on this horse yet. He did look okay late in the race last time. Took a while to get on track, but I certainly understand why Eric is booting him out of the top 10, at least for now. He's a bubble horse for me. I'm guessing he is for you as well.
Yeah, he's a little too impressive in some of his earlier races to completely ignore him. But, that's one of those deals where with inactivity, some other horses can come in. So he just had to come out temporarily. I've got no problem with him getting right back in that mix as soon as possible after a progressive and improving run in the Bluegrass. But for now, he'll have to be on the outside looking in.
The other horse who's out is probably out, and that's Hypnus. Now, this is one that I know you never fully believed in. I bought Eric's trip case. Nick Tamaro was on the train as well, but he just did not show us much in his return to the races this weekend at Fairgrounds. I think this is one we just have to regroup and see if Hypnus can deliver on the hype a little bit later on in the season, perhaps.
Yeah, it seems like every year there's a horse that kind of makes has a trip, makes a run, and gets everyone excited. But there's a lot of circumstances that led to that, right? Maybe a fast pace in front of them. Other horses that don't want to go this far. So there's this illusion that something special is happening when in reality it's not. There's actually another horse we'll talk about on this top 10 I feel very similar with. I feel like he's a little dressed up with the way that his runs look. And I don't think he's actually one that I'm too excited about.
I like that tease. Let's get to number 10 on the list. This horse, Tistastic. He was a good representative of the Rebel form, coming back to win very impressively to the eye in the Louisiana Derby over the weekend. Steve Asmussen obviously dealing with this long hoodoo with the Kentucky Derby. Is there a chance Tistastic could be the one that finally gets him the roses?
I wouldn't go that far. If Curlin couldn't do it, it's going to take a super horse, right? I just think that Tistastic's run in the Rebel was I thought he was going to run better that day. He was a little disappointing, but he did come back and run extremely well in the Louisiana Derby. The one thing I'll say about the Louisiana Derby is a lot of these horses are going to be answering questions for the first time come the first Saturday in May. Tistastic already kind of answered that question, running the mile in 3/16. Yes, a 16th short of a mile and a quarter, but if you can get a mile and 3/16, you can get a mile and a quarter. So he's at least answered that question. The number didn't come back as fast as I would like to get overly excited about this horse helping Steve Asmussen get his first Kentucky Derby, but he's definitely a contender and deserves to be in the top 10.
Number 9 is Tappan Street. We're going to learn a lot more about him this weekend. He's in there in the Florida Derby against the likes of Sovereignty. I did a full write-up of this race over at theraces.com. We have a whole other video on it as well. Long story short, I see Tappan Street as a key contender and probably the one most likely to upset the big horse in the Florida Derby. If the big horse is to be upset, what do you think about Tappan Street?
Yeah, I mean, horses like this that come out of the Brad Cox barn are always dangerous. He's going to have to get a little bit faster, right? You'd like to think that Sovereignty already got a chance to run first off of a break and should take a step forward from that. Now, Tappan Street's going to be making his first start since February, and it just feels like he's just a little bit behind the 8 ball for me. A lightly raced horse will have to get faster and get better to be competitive against a horse like Sovereignty.
Number 8 is Sandman. Folks will remember had that wild trip 2 races back, got on a lot of people's radars, then came back and ran okay, getting third next time out. This is a horse, I think you were pretty skeptical about the form of the last race, but what do you think about Sandman as an individual?
Yeah, this is the horse I was alluding to that I just feel like is just really dressed up. Right. And look, I don't want to knock the horse. I'd love to own the horse. And the horse is going to be one that will probably make a lot of noise throughout this 3-year-old year. But it's just one of those situations where he's going to be overbet on Derby Day. He's going to be overbet wherever he shows up next, just because he keeps coming on late, getting people excited. He had some trouble the race before. I just think he's dressed up. He'll be a little overbet.
He shows up next in this Arkansas Derby. And I do think while a win may be out of reach, certainly one I'm going to be looking at for the underneath spots in my vertical wagers. He might just be, as JK intimates, that kind of horse. Next up, Chancer McPatrick did not win his return race in the Florida Derby, but didn't do a whole lot to diminish his standing either. This one being pointed in a very Chad Brown established pattern to the Bluegrass Stakes. What do you think about Chancer McPatrick? Did you want to see more the last day, or is he right on target?
Yeah, I did want to see a little bit more for him. He's a dual grade one winner, a talented racehorse who finishes his races. He didn't necessarily do that in the Tampa Bay Derby. Now, I understand he probably needed the race, and he'll probably move forward off of that. But how forward will he move? He's one of those horses where I don't have a problem with him being on this top 10 list. I just don't necessarily want anything to do with him quite yet. Let's see what he ends up doing in this Bluegrass. And if he shows up and runs well here, he's one that could jump back onto my radar. But for now, it's more of a wait and see for me.
Couple of weeks to wait for that one to make the return to the races. All Cole Battle has done, JK, in his last 4 starts is win them all. Most recently in the Grade 2 Rebel, where under a terrific ride by Vargas, aggressive ride, getting him into the race, was able to run down that loose leader in Matticat Road and stay ahead of a pace that appeared to be collapsing late. This horse, on paper, he hasn't done a whole lot wrong. Why am I not more excited about him?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the connections. I don't know what it is, but he's an honest horse, and that goes a long way, I think, in situations like this. He's probably one of those horses that's gonna have to earn it in a big one for people to kind of really jump on the bandwagon. Let's see how he handles the Grade 1 company of the Arkansas Derby. If he could pull that out, I think people could maybe kind of turn the corner on him a little bit. But he's just, probably just a little bit of the little guy. He's one of those underdogs that made the Sweet 16.
Part of me will admit I'm enough of a figure monkey that it's just been hard to get fully excited, but we'll see what kind of figure he runs. We'll see what kind of performance he delivers on the weekend. Things could change in a hurry. I mentioned earlier this video brought to you by our friends at twinspires.com and their robust new tournament platform. If you go to twinspires.com and you click on tournaments, you can see the plethora of options. They are back in contest in a big way. The return of the Kentucky Derby betting challenge this first Saturday in May. You can buy your way in or you can win your way in. Prize pool expected to be north of $250,000. Go to twinspires.com/tournaments and check out all the opportunities to win your way in or buy your way in to horse racing's newest major. That brings us to the top 5. And here's one that I swear I saw you do a double take when you saw our man, Eric DeCoster, our content producer who dutifully puts together these top 10 lists for us, put this horse at number 5. His name, Cornucopian. He's only raced once. It was 6 furlongs over this Oaklawn Park track. He looked really good in doing it. He cracked the triple digits on the Beyer Speed Figure scale. If you look at the time form scale and just look at the raw number, it would have been more like a 106 than the 101 that he earned. It was awesome. Is he a major contender, JK, or is this a case of too much too soon as it pertains to Cornucopian?
Well, I mean, if you look at it, who's attempting to do it, it gives you a little bit more comfort, right? Bob Baffert obviously has done some pretty special things in this Triple Crown, right? He ended the 37-year drought with American Pharoah, comes right back with Justify, wins a Triple Crown. Bodemeister late to the party. He gets this horse to run extremely well, breaking from the outside post in the Arkansas Derby and runs one of the best runner-up efforts in the Kentucky Derby we've seen in quite some time. And then back to Justify again, defeating that Apollo curse. So if someone's going to do it, I suppose it's Bob Baffert. This horse is going to have to prove it to me. I'll be looking for some alternatives in the Arkansas Derby. It's just a lot really soon.
The silver wig staying in the closet, but I might borrow it because I do think this horse looks really interesting. I think, crucially, he might be catching the right group to do something so difficult. The female family here, I mean, you have this is a $1 million baby. So you know the horse is supposed to be able to run this far. And you look at this female family, Second Dam, Pleasant Home, Phipps, Color Bear, what'd she do? Win the Breeders' Cup Distaff with a 107. I think he's going to like the distance. I think he catches the right spot. Going to be very interesting to see how it turns out. I think Eric, by putting this horse fifth, has certainly told us who he likes in the Arkansas Derby. Let's get to number 4. We can keep the silver wig out for these next 3 runners as we have a cluster of Bob Baffert runners. Next up is Barnes. Barnes is a horse I can speak out of both sides of my mouth about. On one hand, he just ran a very fast figure. He's obviously meant to be a special horse in this barn. But on the other hand, if he didn't beat journalism with the trip he had last time, when's he ever going to beat journalism? He's still a horse you have to think of to be a major player for first or second in the Santa Anita Derby, any way you slice it, and maybe the Kentucky Derby as well. Tell me your current thoughts on Barnes.
Yeah, look, he was a little overhyped, I think, probably going into the race. But he actually ran one of his lifetime best races in defeat. So you'd like to think he's traveling in the right direction, and with the right trip and the right situation, he can win the Kentucky Derby. He deserves to be here. I prefer journalism over him, but I'm not nearly as offended by Barnes people as I was prior to this race. He makes a lot more sense, honestly, in defeat.
Let's talk about the 2-year-old champion, Citizen Bull, one who might rightly make Rodney Dangerfield claims to you and me, saying he hasn't gotten the respect when really all he's done is win. I just want to see him do it in a scramble. I want to see him do it in a more competitive situation. That'll come up. He'll have his opportunity to prove me wrong, kick sand in my face, stuff me in a locker, whatever terminology you want to use in the Santa Anita Derby. He certainly deserves to be on anybody's top 5 based on his resume, but I ain't sold. Are you?
No, he's just one of those horses that reminds you of some of the sports teams you've heard about in the past of the strength of schedule. They didn't play anyone. What are they going to do when they get into a dogfight? One of those situations. So it's nothing that's new to us if you're a sports fan. And I think that's exactly who he is. He just hasn't done it. He hasn't overcome any adversity. So what's going to happen when he gets looked in the eyes? He might handle it. And he might take the test, and he might even be better. But you just don't know. That's why he's kind of lukewarm at the top of this list.
For me, I look at this list into tiers. We have the A tier left, sort of 1 and 1A, 1 and 2 on the list. We'll get to them in a minute. Before we do that, though, I want to encourage you to do 2 things. Let us know what you think in the comments of this video. Who would your number 1 be for this year's Kentucky Derby at this early stage? Let us know what we got right, what we got wrong. We'd love to engage with you down there. We love the robust conversations we have in these top 10 videos. The other thing is to make sure that you subscribe to that In the Money Media YouTube channel. We have lots of exclusive YouTube comment, half a dozen videos this week at least. You don't want to miss them. Click that like button. That's going to help us with the algorithm, help other people find the show, keep that conversation going, and make sure you subscribe. It's one of the things you can do to help us the most. And I know from looking at this back end here that about 70% of you aren't subscribed. It's something you can do for free that really helps us out. Subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Let's get to our exacta, as it were. I think both you and me might have this in the opposite order of our content producer, Eric. He's got number 2 as journalism. Boy, was that last race impressive, both visually, race he didn't have to win, he did anyway, great attitude. It also came back really strong on the clock. How serious of a Kentucky Derby contender is journalism to you, JK, next seen presumably in the Santa Anita Derby?
Yeah, I mean, he's my top horse right now, the way that he ran in that comeback race, the connections that he's with. He's going to continue to improve. Michael McCarthy does an outstanding job, especially with these younger horses. He continues to have them improve. Look at Rombauer, who won the Preakness for him a few years back. Was just a kind of a side horse, but just kept getting better and better until he won that Preakness. I think he'll do the same with journalism. I much prefer journalism. Nothing against the top horse in here, but I much prefer journalism.
Maybe production meeting in the middle of the show. Maybe we can link at the end of this video to the chat I had with Michael McCarthy after the last race so folks can hear from the horse's mouth, as it were, about how excited he is about this runner. Number 1 on the list, no surprise, it's Sovereignty. This horse, when I made my first Derby list back in November, he was at the top. It took a Herculean effort from journalism to supplant him because I was super impressed by what we saw from Sovereignty in his return to the races, where the market was screaming at us that he was short. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but he won anyway, and he's supposed to move forward. He doesn't have the easiest post. He faces a serious rival in the likes of Tappan Street, maybe Disruptor in the Florida Derby this weekend. I don't know that he has to win the Florida Derby, but he's still, regardless, as long as he puts in an effort, is going to be among my A-level contenders for this year's Kentucky Derby. Am I overrating Sovereignty? Or are you right there with me?
No, I thought he ran extremely well. I wanted a little bit more out of him from a figure standpoint, but with a trainer like Bill Mott, he's one that is a target type. He's gonna have his horse peak on the biggest days. That wasn't the biggest day, the race before. So I think he's gonna take another step forward. I've got no problem with him at all. I just much prefer journalism. But Sovereignty, if someone gave me a winning Kentucky Derby ticket on Sovereignty, I'd probably put it in my wallet.
I love it. Good stuff from you, JK. Thanks once again to Eric DeCoster for his help on these videos, as well as our team, Andrew Brown and Dallas Abel, bringing you the good stuff all Triple Crown season long. We're going to have a lot more of these coming. Make sure you subscribe to that In the Money Media YouTube channel.